Hey friend, welcome back. My name is Donnie Alvarenga, and I am here with my brother Don DeCuna, and we're excited to dive back into what is it that an ancient temple has to tell us about what's going on today. I mean, there is absolutely no doubt that there is something going on today. Okay. Today just happens to be August 29th, 2020. And there's a lot going on in the world right now, a lot going on from a pandemic to hurricanes to fires. We know there is something going on, and we believe that the Bible has something to say about that. And so we have gathered together to start analyzing what is it that the Bible has to say about that, and specifically what an ancient temple has to say about that. So what we did last week, and we're going to do a little bit of a recap in a minute, but what we did last week was we kind of set out some ground rules, right? Kind of to make sure that we're all on the same page when it comes to how we're going to study the Bible. And we talked a little bit about prophecy in Isaiah 46, verse 10. It says, I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times, what is still to come. I say my purpose will stand, and I will do that I please. And so what we know is that we have an amazing, incredible, gracious God that kind of tells us what's going to happen before it happens. And so last week we talked a little bit about prophecy and what that means in terms of what was it, Don? There was to the individual and there was to the nation.
So
What was it?
specific individuals, God's people, the enemies of God, and then humanity as a whole. Then sometimes it mixes together.
Yes. Well, what I can tell you is this. I know God exists for a fact. I have seen him over and over and over in my life. But every time I dive into prophecy, it just removes any doubt that there is a God. When you have somebody that tells me that this is going to happen and then it happens, it's just amazing with specificity and detail. And that's what we're going to be diving into today. The question I have for you today is, can the Bible be trusted? And we're going to dive into it so that you can come to your own conclusion. I'm going to go ahead and kick us off with prayer, and then Don, you can take it over, okay?
Yep.
Our Father in heaven, thank you so much for your grace upon us in terms of really giving us a heads up as to what's coming, the love and the care that you have for us, and giving us a little bit of insight really truly is an anchor in the midst of an uncertainty. And I praise you for that. I pray that your Holy Spirit join us right now and help us understand what you want us to understand so that we can find hope and peace no matter what is going on in the world today. Thank you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start sharing. All right, so we said earlier, we're going to do a quick little recap. So we started with prayer, so we did that right this week, so progress. Number two is God's immutability, right? So when he does things, he does them for a reason, but he tells us and warns us through his prophets. Scripture and prophecy can only really be understood through the power of the Holy Spirit. That's why we pray. That's why we want to get energized and bring the Holy Spirit in to give us that enlightenment. We got the whole Bible approach. We're going to go from Genesis to Revelation. We're not going to get stuck in the New Testament. We're not going to get stuck in the Old Testament. It's all one testament from the God of the universe. And then, this idea of who are the audiences? Who does prophecy go to? So last week we gave a quick snippet of a specific prophecy when it comes to Adam and Eve. Another prophecy that tied it all to humanity, right, with the flood. And then one specifically for God's people when it talks about Abraham and him being the father of a great nation. So this week we're going to tap into the enemies of God and humanity as a whole. We discussed a little bit about proper hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is a word that basically means the proper devising or the dissecting of Scripture, right? So breaking it down properly. For those that want to follow along with me, we have a couple of bit.lys down there that is this same presentation I'm doing today in a PDF format. All these links are active. You can click on the little blue italicized links and they will send you to the internet somewhere, either to Webster's Dictionary if you don't understand a word, or to an actual scripture, right? So if I say something and you want to know what the exact text was, click on the link and it'll bring it up in Bible Gateway. In the modern English version, you can switch it to whatever translation you feel like. So again, proper hermeneutics, context matters. God wants us to read his word the way he put in the Bible to read his word, right? Proof texting, again, it's very important, but it needs to be in harmony with the entirety of Scripture. And the way we're formatting this whole thing is about God's people and everyone else. We're not doing dispensations. We're not doing anything else, but we're talking about the sheep and the goats. We're talking about the saved and the lost. We're talking about, the wheat and the tares, right? Black and white, 1 or 0. Now we're also going to talk, we'll be discussing sometimes about different words and what they mean in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. Tap into it if you can. And then we went into the nuances of Hebrew literature. I'm not going to hit up on all of them, but I do want us to remember the chiastic structure. I'm going to keep bouncing back on this all the time. Chiastic structure is vital to understanding prophecy. So what are we doing this week? Let's start with Daniel 2, right? So this week we're going to be talking about the enemies of God and also humanity as a whole. So who is Daniel?
I did want to just dive in for a second and kind of tie it back to what does this have to do with the sanctuary? Because that's really what the title of this whole study is. What does the sanctuary have to tell us? Well, this is the thing, is the sanctuary will tell us nothing if we don't believe the Bible is true. Okay. It will tell us nothing. And so what we're talking about today is let's kind of dive in a little bit and find out, can the Bible be trusted? Once we can establish that, we can dive into the sanctuary and find out what it's telling us about today, right? So today we're going to dive into Daniel 2. And, I homeschool my kids, and we use a curriculum called Classical Conversations. So for the past 3 years, my kids have been memorizing the timeline of history. They start at creation and they go all the way to September 11. And they memorized every single detail. And it's pretty amazing as we look back through the timeline of history, how we look back, but God looked forward. And he told us what was going to happen before it actually happened. And that's what we're going to look at today. So go ahead.
All right. So who is Daniel? So the name Daniel in Hebrew means God is my judge. So there's already some things we can take just by the name of Daniel. Because where was Daniel? He was in Babylon, right? He was a member of the Judean royal family who was taken captive and served in the court of Babylonian kings. He also served in the court of Persian kings, Medo-Persian kings that took over after Babylon fell. What's the situation? All right, so at the time of Daniel 2, he's a spiritual and political advisor to the king, but he's actually in studies. He is a student. He was brought in. He's approximately between the ages of 15 to 18. This is around the time frame. And he was taken. He was made a eunuch, and he's a student, right, under a distant king. There are some details in Daniel 1 that I recommend everybody go back in, and at a future presentation, we're going to talk about some other chapters of Daniel. But he was given specific spiritual insight due to the king's concerns of what was going on with him, right? When did these events happen? So he lived from 620 to 530. These are all approximations, but they're pretty close. The prophecy that is described in Daniel 2 happened approximately 606 BC. So we could think that's a long time ago, right? This is 600 years before Christ, right? So how did it come to this? So how did it even happen that he's there? Well, God's people rejected God, right? And they became like their neighbors, and they became idolaters, and they did all kinds of shady stuff. So God withdrew his protection from them and used their neighbors kind of as a punishment for them. So first the Syrians came in and took over the northern kingdom of Israel and dispersed them throughout their whole nation. Babylon eventually destroyed Assyria. Now Babylon comes in, doesn't really have too much of a beef with the Judeans. Nebuchadnezzar really has a problem with Egypt. but Judea is on his way to Egypt. So being the conqueror he is, kind of takes them captive. You know, he attacks them. On the way out, he took them captive. So literally took the nation captive. All right. I just saw a chat pop up there. Sorry. So now there was actually a prophecy from the prophet Nehemiah that they would be taken captive for 70 years. So during the time that Daniel was there, he was there for 67 of those 70 years during that time, and then a little bit more under the Persians. So why is this book even important? Why should we even discuss it? Because it sets the stage for the longest prophetic timeline in Scripture, right? The conquest of Babylon, Hebrew liberation, return to Judea, establishment of the prince, aka the anointed, which the word Messiah literally means the anointed. The Christ literally means the anointed, right? The chosen of God. Talks about the arrival, his first arrival and death, rise and fall of various other empires, which is what we're going to be discussing today. Another Hebrew exile, cleansing of the sanctuary, right? Their terminology that Daniel uses throughout all of his prophecies that are tied to the sanctuary. Persecution of God's saints, the end of / latter days, second coming, and messianic kingdom, right? All this in the book of Daniel. A significant amount of the prophecies describe events portrayed in reference to God's sanctuary on the earth as a replica of his throne room in heaven, right? So the sanctuary on earth, a replica of his throne room. So the scope of the prophecies that God revealed Daniel span over 2,450 years of human history. And we're going to tie these specific events to historic events in history that we can look back and validate the Bible as true. Just what Donnie said. So, what do you think so far?
Well, I was just thinking about so many times when there's fortune tellers, right? Fortune tellers kind of give us this broad statement that said that anything really could line up with what they said. You know, it's like anything. They'll say something like 2020 will be a difficult year, right? And you're like, oh my goodness, they were spot on. 2020 was a difficult year. And so then they just make it so broad that anything goes. We can pick and choose how we want to interpret that specific prophecy. What I love about studying Daniel 2 is that it's definitely not that way. It is incredibly specific. It's incredibly specific. And I mean, like it names things out before they were there. So I can't wait for us to dive in.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm actually bringing up Daniel 2 on the screen. So, Donnie, if you can read for me the first 17 verses, okay, and I'll pick up from there.
And I do want to kind of just remind everybody that's watching, we challenged everybody with this last week, but we want to make this challenge again. If there is anything that we say that is not in line with the Bible, we invite you to not come back. Okay? We invite you to challenge us, okay? Because we are not coming at this from any specific religious ideal, okay? What we are doing is we want to do a primitive study of the Bible, okay? So he put up Bible Gateway. I have my physical Bible in my hand, and we invite you to go get yours and make sure that what we are saying is in your Bible. So you want me to read from verse what to what?
Verse 1 through 17, or through 18, sorry.
Okay, so and in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. Then the king gave the command to call the magicians and the astrologers and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans to tell the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king. The king said to them, I have had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to understand the dream. Then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will tell the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the command from me is firm. If you will not make known to me the dream with its interpretation, you shall be cut in pieces and your houses shall be made a dunghill. But if you tell the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore, tell me the dream and its interpretation. They answered again and said, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will tell the interpretation. The king answered and said, I know of certainty that you are bargaining for time, because you see that the command from me is firm. If you will not make known to me the dream, there is but one decree for you. For you have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me until the circumstances changed. Therefore, tell me the dream, so that I know that you can tell me its interpretation. The Chaldeans answered before the king and said, there is not a man on the earth who can tell the king's matter, inasmuch as no great king or ruler has ever asked such things of any magician or astrologer or Chaldean. Also, it is a rare thing that the king requires, and there is no one else who can tell it before the king, except the gods whose dwelling is not with the flesh. For this cause the king was angry and very furious, and commanded to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. Therefore the decree went out that the wise men should be slain, and they sought for Daniel and his companions to be slain. Then Daniel answered with discretion and wisdom to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree from the king so urgent? Then Arioch made the thing known to Daniel. Then Daniel went in and desired of the king that he would give him time in order that he could tell the king the interpretation. Then Daniel went to his house and made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, so that they might ask for compassion from the God of heaven concerning the secret, so that Daniel and his companions might not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon.
All right, so give me a 1-minute elevator pitch of what actually happened in this section.
King had a dream. It woke him up from sleep. He couldn't remember the dream, but he knew it was something pretty big. So he called all his wise men and said, tell me what I dreamed and tell me what it means. And they're like, tell me what you dreamed and I'll tell you what it means. And the king was just beside himself and said he was going to kill everybody. And Daniel heard about it and said, can you give me some time so that I can ask God about this? Right. Yeah. And so he went to his friends, asked his friends to pray so that we can find out what was it that the king dreamed.
Yep. So let me throw out a couple things I want people to focus on as you're reading here. That's great, concise little description. One thing, before he fell asleep, his spirit was already troubled, right? Before he even went to bed, he was conflicted before he even went to bed. That's one key thing. Why would the king be so stressed out, right? I mean, obviously he's a king, he's got a lot of responsibilities. But why? And we'll get into that later on. The second thing is that he called his magicians, his astrologers, and his sorcerers, and the Chaldeans. So we see a couple of groups. We see mystical groups, right? Magicians, astrologers, and sorcerers. Chaldeans were his religious leaders, right? So they were the ones that, dealt with Marduk, who was the principal king of Babylon. And there's tons of deities. But these Chaldeans were the people that had been conquered, but had they basically ran the people as a religious order, right? So the Chaldeans were the religious leaders that had the people's ears. So the king always wants religious people around him because that way he can kind of get to the people, kind of get the drumbeat of what's going on. The next one is that the Chaldeans and all these mystics could not give the king his interpretation, right? Couldn't give it to him. Let me see what this chat says. All right, if something comes up in chat, can you just tell me what it is?
Do you want to stop sharing screen?
Yeah. All right, so the next thing is that they kept trying to buy time. They're like, hey, tell us what this dream is and we'll give you some interpretation, right? So they had a desire to actually give him the interpretation, but they physically couldn't, right? So what is he doing? He's like, okay, these people, like, why am I paying you? Your whole job here in this court is to entertain me. It's to tell me what's going on with my people, right? Do you think Nebuchadnezzar's a true Marduk believing person? Maybe, maybe not. He's more worried about power and conquest. But he has these guys that are supposed to be his spiritual advisors. And they can't help him. So it's like, why do you live in these mansions that I pay for? You know, so it's like, I can tell you what, they're my mansions. They're my houses. So I will turn them into dung heaps before I let you live in it. In fact, you're not even going to live if you can't answer this. The next thing is that the actual mystics and religious leaders admitted that the only person that can know this are the gods. The only person that can get inside of his brain are the gods. So he's like, you can't ask a man to do this because the only one that can do this are the gods. And if they're not telling us, they're not telling you, you're not going to get your information. So that's when he goes ballistic, right? The last part is that when Daniel, again, he's a student. He hasn't finished graduating yet. So all of a sudden they're going to come kill him. And he's like, I'd never even had a chance, right? I never got to graduate. You know, you can think of him as being like a high school kid or a freshman in college. And he's like, what do you mean you want me to operate on this person? I was like, I haven't even done my residency yet, right? It's not fair. But what did he do? Is he got his friends to come with him to plead to God. So it wasn't this idea that Daniel was just like, you know what, God, I need to do this on my own. He reached out for his friends to say, hey, we need to do this, not just to save our own lives, but to save the king. Because what would have happened if the king murdered 50, 20, 100 people? The king now is a murderer, right? So it's not just his concern for himself, it's his concern for his friends, and it's his concern for his king, right? So they ask for compassion from God. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick into the revealing part. And so, Donnie, if you want to read 19 through 23, and then I'll just kick off straight into the explanation. Go ahead.
Okay, it's coming up. Let me find it. Okay, 19 to 23. So then the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. It is he who changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who know understanding. He reveals the deep and secret things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. I thank and praise you, O God of my fathers, for you have given me wisdom and might, and have made known to me now that we asked of you, for you have made known to us the king's matter.
All right, so what's the very first thing that Daniel wants us as his readers to understand about the situation?
It's all God.
It's all God, right? So he's like, you know what? All this stuff happened, and when Daniel got that revelation to him, he has no doubt in his mind that God's in control. So even today, when all this craziness is going on, who's in control?
God.
God. So let's go into the interpretation. Therefore, Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had ordained to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said to him, do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will tell the interpretation. Then in haste, Arioch brought Daniel before the king and said to him, I found a man of the captives of Judah who can make known to the king's interpretation. So this is just something I find interesting. Who went to who? Daniel went to Arioch, right? Saying, I can tell the king his interpretation. Daniel goes to the king and says, well, I found a guy. So who's trying to get credit here? Arioch being the captain, he's trying to bank for promotion. He's actually putting his neck on the line, because if Daniel was wrong, what do you think would have happened to him? So by his own pride, he might have been, I don't know. But in the end, it's for God's glory, so that's why he did it. So the king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, and that's something interesting that if we have time, we'll go into. Are you able to make known to me the dream which I've seen, and its interpretation. So Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king has demanded, the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers cannot tell the king. But there's a God in heaven who reveals secrets and makes known to the king Nebuchadnezzar that what shall pass in the latter days. Your dream and the vision of your head upon your bed are these. So he's telling him that he reminded the king that he was right to not trust those people. He reminded them that he was right, that no human being on the face of the planet would be able to answer his query. The only person would be the God of heaven, right? So here's the interpretation, or at least what the dream was, and then later on we're going to go into the interpretation. As for you, O king, your thoughts came upon your head, upon your bed, about what would come to pass hereafter. So, earlier on in the passage, what did you read, Donnie? What happened before he went to bed? He was troubled, right? He was already bothered. Daniel's not only telling him his dream, he told him what he was doing before his dream. So the reason he was bothered is because Nebuchadnezzar was thinking, I have this ginormous empire. What's going to happen after this? Right? What am I going to leave to my kids? You know, what's going to happen? I'm hearing these noises from other parts of my realm about uprisings. I'm hearing these noises about other kingdoms rising, right? So he's concerned about what's going to happen to his kingdom. So here, what would come to pass hereafter? And he who reveals secret makes known to you what shall come to pass. But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living man, but for the purpose of making known the interpretation of the king, that you might understand the thoughts of your heart. So even Nebuchadnezzar didn't understand what he wanted, right? But God reads the heart. So here we go. Here's the actual dream. You, O king, were watching, and there was a great image. This image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before you, and its form was awesome. This image's head was of fine gold, its breast and arms of silver, its belly and its thighs of bronze, and its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You watched until a stone was cut without hands, which struck the image upon its feet, which were of iron and clay, and broke them in pieces. Then the iron and clay, the bronze, the silver, the gold were broken in pieces together and became like chaff of the winter's threshing floor. And the wind carried them away so that not a trace of them was found. But the stone that stuck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This is the dream. Now we will tell the king of its interpretation. So, give me an elevator pitch, Donnie. What was the dream?
There was a statue. The king dreamt there was a statue. There was a head, like the statue had different parts along the body. And at the end, so there was different metals, right? There was gold and bronze and whatever. And at the end, there was a stone that was cut. What was it
Not by human hands.
Not by human hands, that was, and destroyed the whole statue.
All right. And then what happened to the stone?
It took over the world.
Yeah. So it became a great kingdom, right? So I'm going to put up here kind of like an artistic representation of what this might look like, right? So obviously this is not necessarily what the actual image was, but it's a good representation. So here we have the head of gold, chest and arm of silver, the belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, and then feet of iron and clay, and there's the stone coming out from the sky. So for the people that are following along, we can actually click on these. They're all clickable things in the PDF. So if you want to know what the head of gold is, we'll click on it. So in verse 32, it goes into the image's head was of fine gold. And now in verse 36, it goes in to say, this was the dream now, and we will tell you the interpretation before the king. You, O king, are the king of kings. For the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, and strength and glory. Wherever the sons of men dwell, or the animals of the field, or the fowls of the heaven, he has given them into your hands and has made you a ruler over them. You are that head of gold. Okay? So, what does that say?
Babylon was the head of gold.
Correct. I mean, here it says it's specifically Nebuchadnezzar, but we can take it as a representation of his kingdom, because his concern is for his kingdom, right? So, who gave Nebuchadnezzar his kingdom?
God.
We read here, for the God of heaven has given you a kingdom and power and glory and strength. So, Nebuchadnezzar thought this whole time it was him. Or he thought it was his father, Nabonidus, right? Oh, we did this of our own accord. However, that's not the case. God allowed him to do that. And one of the main reasons he did was to punish his very own people who had rejected him, right? Let's go into the chest. Verse 32. The image's breasts and its arms, and you can see the little dots. I'm trying to minimize what's in the actual script, but I encourage you to follow along in your Bibles, just to, for presentation purposes. The breasts and arms are silver. This is the dream. Now I'm going to tell you the interpretation. After you, another kingdom inferior to yours will rise. So, what is he telling him? What did Daniel just do sticking out his neck?
He said, you're going to lose your kingdom. Your kingdom will no longer be the bomb.
Okay, so imagine our country. Imagine if somebody came to our president and told our president, after the United States will come, who knows, another kingdom. Because here he didn't really specify who it was, right?
Not here.
Not here. So he just said there will be another kingdom. How well do you think our country would take it when we were fine? Maybe if we were really worried that we were about to get invaded, it might make a little bit more impact. But at this point, Nebuchadnezzar is absolutely fine. In fact, his kingdom's expanding.
And I think you can speak to that a little bit more just because you are in the military. So you can literally say how the United States would respond to a comment like that.
Well, I mean, it's just ideas. Like we always defend ourselves by a perceived threat, right? So we always assume a threat, but we got to think this is way back when, where the entire world hadn't even really been discovered. So he's like, I just took out Assyria. I just took out Egypt. Those are the ones I was worried about, right?
And I think that's another piece of what you just said that's very important to kind of think about, is that back then, Babylon was the bomb.com, right? Babylon was the world empire, right? And we don't necessarily have a world empire right now. And that's going to come along in the prophecies. But, back then, that was a different world. And Babylon was the world ruler, right?
So now, being a student of history, we can devise what kingdom took over the Babylonians. So let's go first back to Babylon. Again, I'm just using Wikipedia because it's easy and it makes it easier for everybody else to get to. But I encourage you to go anywhere and everywhere to get this information. This is the swath of what Babylon looked like under the Neo-Babylonian Empire, where Nebuchadnezzar was in charge of. We see that region of the world called the Fertile Crescent, or the Levant, right? So these are the areas that really grew even into Egypt, okay? That's Babylon. So who came and conquered Babylon? Oops. The Achaemenid Empire, also known as the Medes and the Persians. Now, the Medes and the Persians knew that they couldn't take Babylon out alone. So they allied themselves. The Medes couldn't have done it by themselves. The Persians couldn't have done it by themselves. Even though Persia was significantly larger and stronger than Media, Media had very, very good tactical skills in war. So they joined together and they threw bodies at the problem till eventually they conquer Babylon. And there's the scope of how big the Achaemenid Empire reached. Okay? The Medes and the Persians are the chest and arms of silver, which is kind of interesting when you think of that. What two appendages are in the chest and arms, right? One left arm, right arm, right? So let's go back into this. Let's go into the waist of bronze. This image is belly and its thighs of bronze. It's a third kingdom of bronze which shall rule over the earth. So we know that there's already a third kingdom. So he's not telling him just who's going to conquer him. He's also telling him who's going to conquer that kingdom. So now going back to the same reference as us in our own day, if we went to our president and said, not only is the United States going to fall to a greater power, that, oh, by the way, everything's fine, pre-COVID, everything's great, right? But that kingdom is also going to get conquered by another kingdom, right?
You know what I think is fascinating just by what you just said was that very often when we think of a kingdom conquering another, we think of them being more powerful. And yet what's fascinating, because you just mentioned that, what's fascinating about this prophecy is that each one, it was actually a power less powerful. It was a power less powerful than the power before, right? It's like the power diminishes as you go down the line. That just seemed to catch my attention.
So one thing that we can understand is we go from precious metals to common metals, right? So we go from gold, which is more precious than silver. It's more valuable than silver. Silver is more valuable than bronze. But here's the other thing. Silver is more plentiful than gold, and bronze is more plentiful than silver, correct? Just as a natural, process of a metallurgy. So let's go back in. So it's a third kingdom now. So what kingdom conquered the Achaemenids? The timeline I put here was actually when this kingdom fell.
Can I just jump in real quick? I'm sorry, just to wrap up that topic we were just talking about, is that we're not coming up with this thing. We're not, I mean, obviously we can see that there's gold and then there's bronze and silver, right? We can see that, but that they're less value and they're more plentiful. But if you look at the text, it says, like, for example, on verse 39, after you, another kingdom will arise inferior to yours. Okay. So we're not just arbitrarily interpreting that just because gold and silver, we're not arbitrarily interpreting that there's lesser value or that these kingdoms were weaker. The Bible is, this is the prophecy. This is the interpretation of the dream. It's literally right there in the Bible, a kingdom inferior to yours. Sorry, go ahead.
All right. So basically, the one that conquered all of it was Alexander the Great. And this is the entire scope of what Alexander the Great conquered, right? All the way up to India. And he was very, very quick with his conquest. He was the ruler of the known world by the age of, I think, 28 or 29. And he died at the age of 31. Okay. So the kingdom would be the kingdom of Greece. After him, they split up. Right? After that kingdom got split into different groups. And we can see here, this is what eventually the kingdom got split up into the kingdom of Cassander, Licinius, Ptolemy, and Seleucus. Okay? After he passed on. At the end of the Third Macedonian War was when they were conquered. So in the link, it talks about the actual fall of this empire, where they no longer were in charge, because obviously we're seeing the pattern here, right? What's the pattern? That another metal's going to follow, right? Oops. So here, the legs. What are the legs? They are the fourth kingdom. So here we have Babylon 1, Medo-Persia 2, Greece 3, fourth kingdom. So again, imagine today in our time, not only do we say United States, but we say Canada is going to beat the United States, and then China is going to beat them, right? So while Daniel had no concept of what Greece was at this point, neither did Nebuchadnezzar, he understood that they would be conquered. In retrospect, as we look back, we can see how it unfolded and how the Bible is true. So here we go. The next kingdom will be of iron, and as iron breaks everything in pieces, it shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, it shall crush and shatter all these. So it will conquer the area and territory that all the previous ones had. So who did that? Who took over after that? The Romans, right? So we can see here Mesopotamia, Babylon, the red, clearly within Roman control, right? This whole area. Now, look at the timeline here. By the time Rome took over, it was 186 BC, where they were the only show in town. Then, their kingdom ended up collapsing in 476 BC, or AD, sorry. So this prophecy is already spanning about 1,000 years, almost. And we haven't even got to the feet. So from the head just to the legs is almost 1,000 years that God revealed to Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel. So let's see what the feet are. Sorry. So the feet are partly of iron and partly of clay. So what makes this one different, Donnie? What's different between this and the previous one?
Well, it's not a solid metal. That's the first thing. It has other ingredients in it besides metal, and it's not a solid metal.
Yeah. But there's also that some of the previous remained, correct?
Yes.
So some of the previous, the iron. So when you went from gold to silver, did any gold remain?
No.
Silver to bronze, did any of that remain?
No.
Bronze to iron, did any of that remain?
Nope.
But now a little remains. There's something still there from the iron mixing with the clay, right? So what does that say? We'll get into that in a minute. The kingdom shall be divided, and there shall be in it some of the strength of the iron, and the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. They shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, and they shall not cleave to one another, even as iron does not mix with clay. In the days of these kings, the God of heaven shall set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And a kingdom shall not be left, and another people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. So we can look here, after Rome fell in 476 BC, there's no other kingdom other than the stone, right? It's just the iron and clay. So if Rome fell in 476 BC, what time period is this? After that, correct? Which would be our day. So does that make sense? Does it make sense that Daniel, 606 years ago, would describe where we would be in time 2,400 years later? Does that make any sense?
No.
Do you think it made sense to Nebuchadnezzar?
No.
We'll see Nebuchadnezzar's reaction as we close out the chapter. But imagine Nebuchadnezzar sitting here, and he's sitting on his throne. Imagine how hard he's gripping the sides of his throne here, right? That he's like, you know what? He didn't just tell me my dream, and he's getting it perfectly accurate as to what I dreamed. He also told me what I was thinking before I fell asleep. right? My own gods couldn't tell me. My own religious leaders couldn't tell me. My own mystics couldn't tell me. But this 15, 16, 17-year-old kid is telling me like he's in my head, right? 2,400 years of human history have elapsed. So now we can boldly go to our president and our leaders and tell them, because the God of the universe revealed this to Daniel in such extreme detail, what follows the feat of iron and clay?
The stone that was cut without human hands.
The stone cut without human hands. So in full confidence, we can stand boldly on Scripture and say, will the United States last forever? No. Will Canada last forever? No. Will the European Union last forever? No. Will the planet last forever? No. Clearly, we're somewhere in the feat with iron mixed with clay. So let's try to get a perspective of what does this mean of iron mixing with clay, right? What does that mean? So inside the script itself, I put a couple links here. So a key indicator here on verse 43, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. So who's mingling with who? And is there anywhere else in the Bible where this kind of terminology was used before? So if we go to Genesis 6, 1 through 3, and then also in John and Revelation, I'll leave the text up there for a minute, but you can click on the link and find out also. In fact, I'm just going to actually put it in chat, so those that want to see. All right, so it's in the chat. In Genesis 6, 1 through 3, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw the daughters of men, and they were fair and took wives of any that they chose. The Lord said, my spirit will not strive with man, for he is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. So, is there any similarities that you see, Donnie, between the passage that we saw in Daniel and this one?
I'm sorry, I was reading something here and I didn't catch it.
So in Daniel 41, it says, in verse 43, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave to one another, even as iron mixes with clay. So right here, mingling themselves with the seed of men. Right here, in chapter 6, verse 1. When men began to multiply on the face of the earth,
okay,
and daughters were born to them, and the sons of God saw that the daughters of men, the seed of men, were fair, and took as many wives as they wanted for each other. The sons of God means what? Let's look what it says in John 1, 9 through 13. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was created through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. Yet to all who receive him, he gave the power to become the sons of God. To those who believed in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of the man, but of God. So when we look back to this text in Genesis, the sons of God are the sons of God. Those who received him, right?
Who believed in him.
Who believed in him. And it's interesting because later on in the verse, it also says, who were born not of blood, nor of will of the flesh, nor the will of man. So what is it? The Son of God is one who follows the will of God. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
The will of man breeds the seed of man, breeds the daughter of man. Now let's see in Revelation how this might tie into itself. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and talked with me, saying, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her sexual immorality." Then he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having on her hand a golden cup full of abominations and filth of her sexual immorality. On her forehead was written, "Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and abominations of the earth." I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. When I saw her, I marveled greatly. Later on in the verse, it says, "Then he said to me, the waters which you saw where the prostitute sits are the peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. These 10 horns, which are the 10 beasts that you saw, will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her with fire. For God has put in their hearts to fulfill his will and be of one mind and to give their kingdom to the beast until the word of God is fulfilled. The woman who you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth." So we see this contrast, right? We see this contrast of iron mixing with clay, right? We see this idea of the sons of God being mixed with the daughters of men. So I sent out in the bit.ly, there's a prophetic glossary that I'll try to bring up here. We can get some of the ideas of what does clay mean, right? I'll bring this over here.
And that goes back to what you were saying, what we've mentioned before, is that we use the Bible to interpret itself, right? Yep. We're not trying to guess. We're looking at the Bible. We see the Bible as a whole. And so we can see in different areas where it tells us exactly what does clay mean.
So clay can mean a couple of things. It can mean just created beings, right? So let me bring it up here. I forgot that I didn't put the thing up. I'll put these verses in the chat as well. Job 10:9. "Remember, I pray, that you have made me as the clay and would return me to dust." Next one in Job. "Surely I am before God like you. I also was formed out of clay." Psalms 42. "He brought me up out of this horrible pit, out of the miry clay, and set my feet on a rock and established my footsteps." This one here is actually pretty close to tying in with what happens, right? So there's iron mixed with miry clay, and eventually his feet will be set on a rock, right? "Surely you've done these things upside down. Shall the potter esteem as the potter's clay? What shall they say of its maker? He did not make me. Or that the thing formed should say the one who formed it, he has no understanding." So here in the verse in Isaiah, for context's sake, this is God talking to Isaiah in the sense that he's saying that as humans, we think of things as upside down. So we say, "Shall the potter esteem as the potter's clay?" In the sense that if we, being the clay, we cannot elevate ourselves greater than the one who makes the pot out of us. Does that make sense? All right, so we can go through all of these, but the idea is that there is clay and there is miry clay. And what does that mean? Clay means it's literally his creation, right? It's his people. But there's miry clay also, which you can get stuck in, right? If you're trying to run through mud, what's going to happen? You're going to get stuck. So here, not even as one shall cleave with another, even as iron doesn't mix with clay. So something remained. Iron remained, right? We think of, was the kingdom of Rome, were they very God-focused, as in the God of Israel, or did they have all their gods? They had Jupiter, and they had Artemis, and they had all these different gods. So what do you think? Did they really care about the God of heaven?
No.
Not really.
I mean, I don't know. I can't speak for them, obviously, but I feel like there were so many gods that it was just like it was a concept to them. It
Yeah.
wasn't a relationship, right? It was this concept of something out there.
Well, it's the idea also that during the kingdom of Rome, they were pantheists, right? I mean, you go to Rome, there's like the Pantheon is there, and it was a building that housed all the deities. In fact, they didn't take Christians very seriously until they started growing, and then they started persecuting them, right? So the kingdom itself, we can think of as a kingdom that is secular, right? It's just a secular kingdom. They have their own gods, but it's tends to be secular. At least the religious authorities, or not the religious, the political authorities don't care much for it. It's kind of a thing they have to tolerate, right? The people believe in it, but they may not. So we have elements of that unbelief, that secularism, that's still around from Rome. But then you also have God's people that are mixing with them, right? So we have this idea where the clay, being God's creation, God's people, start mingling, just as they did in Genesis. The sons of God started mingling with the daughters of men. And we read in Revelation of how it'll be later on, where the kings of the earth start mingling with a woman, right? So it's this idea that during this time frame, which is where we live in today, we have the political structure trying to get in bed with religion, right? And we have religion trying to get in bed with political structure. They're both mutually attracted to each other, right? So, but here in the Bible it says, it's not going to work out. It's literally telling you, it's like, they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron mixes with clay. So this isn't a political or religious discussion. It's actually, God he poo-poos both of them, right? He's basically telling both of them, you guys don't need to be mixing with each other. In fact, you can try all you want. It's not going to happen. So, what happens next after this? Oh. The stone, right? So a stone was cut without human hands upon its, and it hits upon the feet where the iron mixed with clay. So did that stone hit the knees? Did it hit the waist? Did it hit the head? Did it hit the shoulders? Did it hit anything else? Where does the stone hit?
The feet.
The feet. Okay. Upon the feet, and broke them to pieces. This was a dream. Now we shall tell the king his interpretation. Inasmuch as you saw the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, the gold, right? And we can see that now he's giving it in reverse order. So originally it was the gold, now he's going up the statue. So notice how the stone is cut out of a mountain, and also when it destroys the whole statue. The entire statue collapses in on itself, which is interesting also in the dynamic that if I was ever going to build a statue with various different precious metals, I definitely wouldn't put the heaviest part and then mix it with clay at the very base of it. It's not structurally sound, right? Eventually, it's going to just collapse on itself no matter what. But here we have a rock hitting it there, and the whole thing falls in on itself. So let's see what this stone could be. Psalms 40, I waited patiently for the Lord, and he turned to me and heard my cry. He also brought me up out of a horrible pit, out of the miry clay, and set my feet on a rock and established my steps. He has put a new song in my heart, even praise to our God. Many will see it and fear and trust in the Lord. Great is the Lord and greatly to be praised. In the city of our God is his holy mountain. So where was the stone cut out of? His holy mountain. Beautiful in the elevation, the joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion in the sides of the north, the city of the great king. The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. He shall become a sanctuary, but a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense to both the house of Israel, and a trap to ensnares the inhabitants of Jerusalem. We can go on and on about this, but this is Jesus Christ. This is God, right? So we know what the stone is. We know what the mountain was, right? So let's see what the stone fills the earth. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver are all broken in pieces and shall become like the chaff of the summer threshing floor. And the wind carried them away, and not a trace of them was found. So is there a trace of the United States there? Is there a trace of China there? Is there a trace of Russia there? Is there a trace of Jamaica there? Is there a trace of El Salvador? There is trace of none. Not a trace. Okay? But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream. Now I will tell you its interpretation. Inasmuch as you saw that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces, all the stuff, the great God has made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter. And the dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. So here's something very important that Daniel says. The dream is certain, and the interpretation is sure. So what does that mean for us?
Well, this is what I see, is that he gave this prediction back in 600 BC, right? And so when he gave this prediction, he was talking about, countries and powers that he did not even know were coming. But when we look back in history, we do know what they're called. We know we can give it a name, right? And when I see that he predicted it and I can look back and see that it happened, it just makes sense that it's going to continue happening, right? So as he talks about this is sure, it's like sure as the sun is going to come out every morning, that the earth will go around the sun, all that stuff. Okay. It's that kind of sure. And that's what I love about studying Daniel 2 and prophecies, is seeing the consistency with which it does come to fruition.
So if you want to go ahead and read the very end of Daniel 2, so 46 through 49, that's kind of like the epilogue. And then we'll kind of finish out some interesting facts about what we just discussed.
Let me make it bigger. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and did homage to Daniel and commanded that they should present an offering and sweet incense to him. The king answered Daniel and said, "Truly your God is a God of gods and a Lord of kings and a revealer of secrets, since you could reveal this secret." Then the king advanced Daniel and gave him many great gifts and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. Then Daniel requested of the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel sat at the court of the king.
So, do you think Nebuchadnezzar agreed with the interpretation? Right? Did he agree with the dream and the interpretation?
Well, I always kind of wondered, just as a kid, if the king did not know what the dream was, anybody could have told him any story, and said, "King, this is what you dreamed and this is what it meant."
Exactly.
But the truth is that he probably would have kind of connected with him as he heard. He's like, oh my gosh, that's it. You know, it's like when you're trying to remember what's the name of, and then you say the name and I'm like, yes, that's it, right?
Yeah.
And so I kind of imagine that that's what happened to him.
Yeah. So in the end, he believed, did he not? Did Nebuchadnezzar believe the dream? And not only that, he promoted Daniel and he made him. So now you get the 17-year-old kid that's in charge of every Chaldean, in charge of every mystic, in charge of the province of Babylon. AKA, that would be the equivalent of a 17-year-old kid being the mayor of Washington, D.C., right? It's literally the capital. He gave him authority over his throne realm, right? So in the end, God does all this stuff for this specific reason. It's so we believe. He tells us these things beforehand, so we believe. This is a great chapter. I would recommend everybody read it. Isaiah 48, 1 through 11. This is God speaking to his people throughout history. We're not going to go into all of it, but I recommend everyone. This is God telling us things beforehand, so we believe. So I'm going to give some other insight here onto Daniel as a historical perspective. In World War I, Kaiser Wilhelm II, he knew of this prophecy. And there had been many who tried to take over and unite Europe since the Roman Empire fell. Kaiser Wilhelm, when he took over the city of Metz in France, there's a cathedral there called Saint-Étienne. And there's a statue of Daniel. And what he said is, I want you to take the head off of Daniel, and I want you to put my face on there. And the reason he did that was so he could disprove the God of the Bible. So you say we're not going to cleave? You say that we're not going to come together? You say that I can't reunify? I'm going to reunify, and to prove it, I'm going to remove the head off that statue and put my own head on it. Right? Do you think God cares what he's doing here? But it just shows the pride of man, right? I don't care. I know this prophecy. Kaiser knew the prophecy. What happened to Germany? They lost. He went to exile and died in obscurity, right? Later on comes Hitler, and he tries to reunify Europe. We all know he didn't succeed. However, when the Germans invaded France and they took over the city of Metz, he went to this same church in Saint-Étienne and said, put the head back on. Get rid of the Kaiser's head, put the original Daniel head on. Because I don't care if his head is on there or not, I'm still going to do it. Right? What ended up happening to him? Millions of people had to die for one man's pride. So we look here, many have tried. And on that link, we'll give you a historic link from history.com that talks about all the people that try to reunify Europe. So I just have a quick little snapshot here. Charlemagne tried to do it. He failed. The Holy Roman Empire tried to do it. They failed. Napoleon tried to do it. He failed. Kaiser Wilhelm tried to do it. He failed. The EU tried to do it, and it failed. With that, we know just recently in 2017, the UK left the European Union. And you get other nations within nations that want to split up even further. Catalonia in Spain. You have Scotland. Every couple of years, they have that referendum on whether they're going to leave the UK or not. So this idea that we have as a human beings is that we discount the things that God has told us. We don't take it into validation. And there's plenty of atheists out there. And there's plenty of even people within the church and different religions. God has spoken it through his prophets. So we can believe that it is him who gave us this information, right? So God wants us to know. So this prophecy spans the rest of human history in and of itself. And God has given Daniel great insight into what actually happens in the leg time, what actually happens in the feet time. So what God is doing is he is giving an information, then he amplifies it and enhances it. So you can think of it kind of like a satellite photo, right? So you got these giant, telescopic lenses that are out there in space. And they take a picture of the big blue marble, right? You can see the earth. But can you see your house? No. If you want to see your house, you have to zoom in further. By zooming in further, you get more detail, right? And then now you see North America, but do you still see your house? No. Okay, let's zoom in a little further. Okay, I see the United States. Do I still see your house? No. Okay, let's zoom in a little further. Okay, I see Florida now. Are we still at your house? Do you understand what I'm saying? What he's trying to show us is where our house is. Our house is in heaven. Our house is with him. Our house is in a renewed and refreshed world. He's zooming in and enhancing, giving more and more detail. So we can think of this statue as the globe. Look how much further we have to dig. And Daniel presents most of his prophecies in reference to the sanctuary. So that's why it's fundamental we understand the sanctuary. Understand why Jesus even had to die. Understand why is it important that God is telling us these things, especially since we are in the clay and iron. We're in there. So we're the closest alligator to the boat. We're the closest alligator walking to the ark, right? He's trying to give us that entry point into his salvation. So that's all I really have when it comes presentation-wise. There is another application we can think of the head of iron, or the head of gold, and the chest of iron, and all this other things. We can consider, what's that?
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm saying we can consider ourselves also like that statue, right? That it's the whole statue isn't one thing. The statue is made of different compartments, right? Gold, silver, bronze, whatever. So it's like, if we use our heads and we're like, well, I can serve God with my mind, but not follow his counsel, the rest of my body's not going to work, right? We can make gods out of our own imagination, right?
Well, I think that we can absolutely extrapolate and use so many different analogies, but what I absolutely love about this study of Daniel is that he spells it out. He says, the head of gold is you.
Yep.
The chest of silver is an inferior kingdom,
Yep.
And there will be another kingdom, and there will be another kingdom. And I just love in studying the Bible that it interprets itself. If you just read along, it will interpret itself. And so that's, the reason we really dove into this specific session this time is really just to confirm, okay, wait, he said this way back in 600 BC, okay? And all of these things have happened throughout history. Maybe next week I can have my kids come and sing the entire timeline song, and we can see that from the beginning to end, it flows, and it follows the sequence that was predicted way back when. And so when I see,
let me throw something out.
Yeah.
God doesn't predict anything. He foretells everything. So
what do you see is the difference between the two?
Well, a prediction means you can make an educated guess. So I can predict that the Yankees are going to beat the Mets because so-and-so's injured and so this. I could predict the weather because I can see these patterns in the storms, but it might rain or it might not. What God is doing is he is foretelling. He is with what did he say at the very end?
The
What
interpretation.
shall come to pass? Shall is a descriptive of it's going to happen, right? The
Beyond a
dream is
shadow of doubt.
certain, the interpretation is sure. So it's not a prediction. He's not saying we think this might happen. No. Prediction has a little element of guesswork in it. So he is literally foretelling him human history.
Yes. And he gave us that insight. And what I find a lot of comfort in knowing that. I find a lot of comfort in the midst of uncertainty that there is a being that is incredibly loving, that is behind it all, that is, keeping it all in his hand, if you will. And at the end, spoiler alert, he wins. Okay. So, we can see everything happening, but what we know is that in the end, he wins. And when he wins, we win. Right. And so next week, we're going to dive in a little bit more into this sanctuary, which is the whole theme of this series. We're going to dive into the sanctuary. What is that? And what were the different components? And why are they relevant? And how is that even relevant to us today? So join us next week, Saturday, 3 p.m. Eastern, as we dive into that. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, that's it. That's what we're going to be talking about.
Would you like to wrap us up with prayer?
Absolutely. Dear Lord, thank you so much for giving us insight, Lord, for actually showing us throughout human history how everything you said happens, how you set up kings and take them down, how you set up nations and take them down. But in the end, we are all your creation, Lord, and we are waiting to be with you in our real home. Please be with every single person that watched this, and that it can go to many more that haven't seen it yet. In Jesus' holy name, amen.
Amen. All right. Have a wonderful week, guys.